Hello and welcome to yet another live chat here on LinkedIn Live. Hello, America's What's Cooking. You can find us here every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And for those who have been following us every week, my name is Ksenia Pola, the Regional Director for Eco North America. And I would like to thank all of us who have been following us every week. We really love having you all involved. So please feel free to give a shout out. My colleague Monica is in the audience with you as well. And if you do have any questions for our guests today, please feel free to ask, because I'm super excited of to introduce my guest today, because she is talking about something which is super important, not only for the meetings industry, but for the entire world and for humanity. Please welcome Montana Burgess from the West Kootenay Ecotourism Eco Society. Did I say that right, Montana?
You got it. Hi, Ksenia.
Could you, before we get started, I messed up, so tell us a little bit more about yourself and your organization.
Well, no relation to ecotourism necessarily. Yeah, my name's Montana. I use she, her, or they, them pronouns is fine too. I live on the unceded territory of the Snakes people, also known as a rural area of the West Kootenays. And for those of you that aren't familiar with our beautiful part of the world, if you were in Spokane and you drove 3 hours north into British Columbia, that's where you'd find me.
Wonderful. And I see we already have a few people joining us and giving a shout out. Our North America chapter chair, Steve, is saying hello, and he's very excited about the topic today. So is our dear friend Peter, who we do share in common, and who's our common denominator and how we know each other. And thank you, Milos, for saying that this topic is also of great importance to you. And let's dive straight into, you just shared where you are at, but in a former life, you were talking about and involved in climate action topics with some really large organizations. So before we go into the specifics, there were some frustrations from your end. Could you share a little bit about that part?
Absolutely. So I used to work with the Climate Action Network, which is a wonderful organization both globally and in Canada and other hubs around the world. And one of my jobs was to go to the UN climate talks and was to coordinate civil society around those talks to make sure there was a watchdog and a ground truthing, so people could know what was going on and it wasn't hidden away. And while that work was really important, and I believe in that forum being an important place for people to come around in the world and try to work together on stopping the worst parts of climate change and other issues, it was really frustrating to not see the effort I was doing materialize on the ground. Again, so important to be playing that watchdog role and helping other groups have the space and time to be coordinated to do that. But I was missing seeing how that changed things on the ground in community. So when I moved to this part of the world 10 years ago, back to British Columbia, where I'm from originally, I wanted to get more involved with community environmental work and social justice work, and to be able to build connections and see my efforts materialize on the ground. So I've been the executive director of the West Kootenay Eco Society, and we're undergoing a name update right now. So Neighbors United is our new name. And when I joined the group in 2016, I was really motivated to make a difference on the ground and see that in the community level.
And the reason why I'm asking you that is because how it is very important to have it on a global level. And for our industry in particular, we have to be part of that platform and have that voice and bring it into our communities, into those smaller local communities. And that's where it's very important. And that's what your example today will be all about, because climate change and climate action is up to every single one of us. And we should start small. We can start small to really affect change. And that is the essence of your great achievement you've just achieved through your deep canvassing. Tell us a little bit more about.
Yeah, so on the ground over the last 7 years now, we've been organizing our community to take local climate action. And we were thinking, what can we do right here in our backyards that's going to make a difference, help make people's lives better that are more vulnerable and marginalized, and also send a strong signal to other levels of decision makers that we are ready in community to take the climate action we need to prevent the worst of the climate impacts from hitting our communities. So we were thinking, how do we do this? So we started working in our communities across the region and identifying enough people who supported the transition to 100% renewable energy across a community. So that means transitioning all the transportation, heating and cooling, electricity, and waste management to be based in 100% renewable energy. So not just electricity, which is what a lot of people think. And so one community by one community, we got enough people supportive that the local governments, municipalities, they passed resolutions at the council table committing to this goal and developing transition plans how to get there. And some of the communities in our region were easier to organize in because there was more people that already agreed with that. And then other communities, like one in particular, were more based in extraction and heavy industry, and their livelihoods depended on that industry. In fact, in this one community, the community is built around a zinc and lead smelter. And so because of the tie of that community to that heavy industry, and because it was a company town, it was very challenging to find those people that were already supportive. And we ran into a lot of skepticism and barriers of people being concerned about what the clean energy transition means for their community, and rightly so. So we knew we had to do something differently than we'd ever done before. So we looked to a model that was developed in the US called deep canvassing, that was used to help people walk through their cognitive dissonance and resolve that to be more in support of an issue. And so we applied that to climate, and a group hadn't done that successfully yet on climate in this community. And over the past 2 years, we had really transformational interactions and conversations with over 1,100 people on their doorsteps or on the phone, digging into why is climate change urgent and important for them? What does it mean? How is it showing up in their lives already? And when we started having these conversations, we learned that most people hadn't had the chance to talk about this yet. They hadn't had the opportunity to talk about how climate change was showing up through wildfires or flooding or changes in the fish populations, in the things that they loved and mattered to them. And so by having these conversations, we were really giving people a chance to figure out why it is important for them, and figure out a way to be able to take action in a meaningful way. And so we found over 1,000 people who were in support of the clean energy transition in this one community. And then City Council very recently also made this commitment to transition to 100% renewable energy. So this deep canvassing, this way of deep engagement with regular citizens, I think, is the way forward on controversial issues to find our common ground, find our humanity, and find the places we can work together. Because usually we agree on more than we don't agree on. It's just figuring out the details is where it can be tricky.
And having those conversations. And I think one of our members of the audience totally agrees with you. As an Albertan, congrats on all what you're doing. This topic remains somewhat misunderstood, in my opinion. Do you see your work being something that can inspire the Canadian meeting market to better identify sustainability issues and tackle those in the right way? Do you think deep canvassing may be a way forward?
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I agree. I think whenever something's really politicized or polarized, I think we need to find ways to have conversations and recognize that most people make decisions based in emotion, not facts. So if we want to put up more graphs, that's great, but it's not going to do it. We have to understand what's at the root of someone's fear or concern and meet them there. And that goes both ways, right? Because it's not a one-way conversation, it's two-way. So I'm really hoping that we can teach other groups how to do this, either directly using the deep canvassing method or taking the principles and applying them to meetings, community, town hall type events, other ways besides one-on-one conversations. And I hope in places that are dependent on resource extraction, we can find some common ground and move forward. And I believe we can. We need to try.
So do you think that the meetings industry could lead the way in getting some of those messages across, or actually learning more to understand the root of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a role for everyone, because I think misunderstandings and confusion, there's a lot of confusion, right? There's a lot of information, there's a lot of misinformation. It's hard to know what works for a community and what is true. So I think the meetings industry could definitely play a valuable role in leading by example in the things that can happen, and also holding spaces for your different colleagues to be able to talk about these things that we often don't talk about, and figure out what is the way forward, not only for this industry, but the folks participating in the industry, and have that ripple effect throughout the wider community.
So when you were doing this project, what did you have in mind? Some long-term impacts you were expecting from? What would success look like for you?
Yeah, so I mean, the immediate success is, I think, in this community, we've worked with a lot of volunteers who are now able to have these conversations that are hard, not only on climate, but they have the skills to have them on other topics. And we are not short of polarizing topics right now in our world. So I'm really proud that we've been able to equip people to talk better with their neighbors about things that they may disagree on. And the big kind of outcome that I'm really excited about is now this community is on the path to plan their transition to 100% renewable energy within their community energy use. So yes, it's a drop in the bucket in the grand scheme of things, but as a heavy industry community, it sets an important tone and example. So the provincial government, the federal government, and other governments can say, if they're ready and willing, we should also be, and let's support them. Let's invest in them to do that, and encourage other places like that to also do that.
And it's really great also for our industry to learn about that method of driving change, and maybe using those town halls and deep canvassing methods. And I think we will post now in the chat also. Montana is speaking much more to this topic in a podcast, which you can find on Spotify, which talks about canvassing for climate action. Here's how to make it work. And my colleague Monica will post it in the chat as soon as she manages. One other thing I wanted to talk to you about is you have achieved that in a small community. And why is it important to also do those climate actions, not only in big cities, but do them also in small communities?
That's a great question. I think so often, at least in my experience, at least in the part of the world I live in, small towns, rural communities, suburban communities that are dependent on resource extraction are not part of the conversation around preventing the worst climate impacts, not only for us, but for our neighbors in other parts of the world that are already experiencing them in much more direct ways right now. So I think we need to have these conversations not only in urban centers like Portland or Toronto. We need to have them everywhere and figure out what we can do in each community that will help our most vulnerable people in each community, and also do our part to reduce the carbon pollution and build new ways of living more sustainably together. So yeah, I think both politically and practically, we really do need everyone, and we need to bring in folks that are currently left out of the conversation.
And it's more about really creating that awareness and educating every single individual that it is important that they contribute as well, and how they can contribute. And Peter is actually asking in practical terms, how does such a process work? Maybe some of our viewers today are not totally aware of how that is working. And thank you, Moni, for posting the link.
Yeah, so just to say, I think I'm at my friend's house and there's a cat on my lap, so enjoy this cat. I think that in very practical terms, I think there's a myth before I get to the how does it work in process. There's a myth that our personal carbon footprints are the only thing that matters. And again, drop in the bucket, even more of a drop in the bucket. I think it's still important to be accountable. And there's this concept of a carbon shadow, which I really like, which basically says take account for what the carbon you're producing. But the most important thing is to be activated to take collective action. So our work is all around taking collective action and not putting the burden of change on individuals, low-income people. Like that, the issue has not been caused by them, and we do not need everyone to own an electric vehicle. That is not the way out of this. We need to make sure we have policies that support folks and help us do this energy transition in a way that doesn't leave those folks behind, but helps make their life better. So in practical terms, deep canvassing, what it looks like is you have your team of volunteer canvassers, and you're going out on the doors or calling phones if you can't because it's too smoky or too cold or COVID's too bad. You're going out to the doorstep and you're knocking on the door, and you're having a conversation with folks. And the surprising part is most people are really happy to stand there and talk with you. There's often a lot of fear around first-time deep canvassers around that, oh, they're going to get mad or shut the door. But the reality is when you ask someone for their opinion and you ask someone to share their experiences, we're pretty deprived of that in my culture, at least. So folks are really often usually happy to talk. And so we have a conversation where we ask them about what do they think about more government action on climate change. We share a story about how we have experienced climate impacts personally and how that's made us feel. We ask them to do the same. We ask them to talk about any kind of the concerns they have, and usually by talking about it and having them just acknowledge that this is something they don't usually talk about and that their neighbors do also talk about this, folks feel pretty happy to have this chance to start to resolve that conflict they have about whatever is on their mind. And then at the end of the conversation, we ask them again to rank how they feel about more government action on climate change. And then we can see if there's been a shift in the conversation. And if they have shifted, we ask them why they've shifted. And then we'll ask them to take an action at the end. So in our case, we asked them if they would add their name in support of their local government transitioning to 100% renewable energy.
Thank you so much. And we have a question in here now from one of our audience members. Do you think too many big corporations pay lip service a little to this by simply saying buy carbon credits and really not taking a deeper look at what they can truly reduce in terms of carbon footprint? And this is actually, Steve, one of the things we will be addressing also at the Ecoplenary in IMEX. And I'm sorry you'll miss it, but happy to hear what Montana thinks on that.
Yes, I feel like people have done their PhD theses on this question. The whole philosophy or existential kind of thought process around carbon credits is big, but I think in short, yes, we need to do more than just say we're gonna do something and buy carbon credits. And the carbon credit market it's all over the place. They are not all equal. And, if you're planting a little seedling tree, it doesn't mean it's going to grow into a big forest. Lots of them don't survive. Anyways, all sorts of things that are problematic with that. But I think really what corporations need to do is to look at the carbon pollution they are producing and figure out ways to reduce it, not only for their bottom lines, because in British Columbia, we have a price on carbon and it's only going to get more expensive, so it makes financial sense, but also because there's a social cost, right? There's a cost to not only the environment, but to the people in their immediate area and further away that are already experiencing pretty bad impacts of climate change. So, I mean, it kind of comes down to like, what's the point of it all? Is the point just to make a profit, or is the point to try to live a healthy and safe life in community? And I think it's the latter.
Absolutely. And we really have to change mindsets to go from reaction, which is the carbon credit, to proactive action rather than just to respond. I think we could go into this topic for another few days, and we would still have tons of things to do. Before we leave, anything you want to share? Because we are on a Hello What's Cooking show. Do you have any favorite foods, restaurants, recipes you would like to share with us?
Well, I was hoping that you were going to cook for me and send me some food. I love to eat. I love to eat a lot of things. I have a gluten allergy. So I have an eternal quest every time I'm in a new town to try to find the most delicious gluten-free pastry. And my bar for judging that is a croissant. And so far, it's pretty bleak out there. So there's a few places I found, Montreal, Vancouver, and I'm sure there's other, but if you know of the perfect gluten-free croissant that tastes like it is loaded with gluten, please let me know. I want it.
Absolutely. And I think being gluten intolerant or allergic to gluten is probably also one of the effects of climate changing and our bodies reacting to it. But we could go into more detail there, I'm sure. Anybody who would like to connect with Montana, please feel free to do so on LinkedIn. She is happy to connect. Thank you all for those awesome questions. If you do want to join me as one of my guests, please email me at xenia.p@ecoworld.org. And the only thing left for me is to announce who will be joining us next week. And that will be Brad Sutherland from Air Canada. And he will also be chatting a little bit more on how this ties in with the airline industry. So we are continuing on our climate action, sustainability, and how this affects our industry in particular. And here is a tip.
Oh, I think Xenia froze up. So
yes, here's a tip for you. I'm back. Wildflower Bakery Cafe in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. They're the best in the state. I'm assuming that is for those gluten-free croissants. So here is a tip for you. Thank you so much, Montana, for joining us. It was a great pleasure to have you today as our guest.
Thanks for having me, Xenia. Bye.